We're back live, Mike. Day two.
Good good morning, Steve. How are
How you
you?
doing? I'm good. I'm good. Uh, can't believe you actually came back.
Yeah, well, you got the more melancholy mic today. I tell you, yesterday was busy and it was a whirlwind, but I made it. I made it up again. Day
Good.
by day, my friend. Whether I get out of bed or not is always a question,
I know. I know you,
especially
Mike.
with this cloud over us. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
New York City,
Energized.
man. I've been
Ran
I've been
this
hearing a
morning.
lot
Feel
of
good.
news out of New York City. You are the world's hot spot right now, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
I
Saw
think of you and
saw
my
Governor.
friends up there often.
Yeah. Saw Governor Cuomo's predictions. Hospital bed. He was originally at 90,000, now 140,000. That's just the growth curve from the prediction to where we currently are is yeah. It's they're expecting
Daunting.
more to come. Yeah. 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 No, it is.
And something I was reflecting on again, getting right into this. Yesterday's show was a good start. We were kind of feeling our way, but I started thinking about some of the things you said, and I rewatched it last night just to get a sense of how it came across. And you dropped something in there that I don't even think I picked up on. What you said, you expect to get COVID-19, and that's just kind of where we all kind of need to be and just be prepared. At some point we're going to probably all experience this, and thankfully many of us, most of us, will have minor symptoms, but that was the whole reason for this drastic measure, right? Is to kind of spread it out, at least to allow our healthcare system to catch up. Is that what you're thinking? You're just like, hey, it's just the new reality.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, and I think we have to think of our individual selves, right? What's our situation? How do we manage it? And as I said, it's you say you got out, you decided to get out of bed this morning, and and I know you'll continue to do it, and as I will, and I think most of the audience will. I think the workplace community is one of those get up and at 'em, right? You look at what we have to deliver. We're responsible for other people every single day, and I think this time is, you be responsible, one, for yourself, and then two, as an industry, we'll all be picked up, and we'll all go forward. And one of the things I did hear this morning, we talked also yesterday about, those self-employed, and
Yeah,
this bill, if it gets pushed through, there will be some cover for the self-employed, which is great. And I know
good.
in the UK they're discussing that as well today. At Parliament are discussing that, so it could be for the UK market again. So people aren't having to make that decision between should I stay home with my family or do I need to go out and earn a paycheck. And while it may not cover 100% of the salaries, it's something.
Yeah, in fact, that's what I've been overwhelmed by is these decisions that need to be made, and I'm glad I'm not the one in authority here, whether it's in the U.S. or over in the U.K. I've talked to some friends over there yesterday as well, and we were all kind of just batting back and forth about the ideas, to deal with this and the decisions being made. Are you a reader of Mark Eltringham's website, workplaceinsight.net?
I know the website. I don't know Mark.
Yeah, it's all things workplace, and he's based in London. And
Mm,
I had him on my podcast last year. Super brilliant guy. In fact, a lot of my connections over there. I don't know. This may not anybody with an accent. I always think is like about 50 IQ points higher than mine, and I always get intimidated by their intellect. But Mark is one of those guys who I definitely get intimidated by his intellect when I read his posts. He's referencing literature and history in a way that I struggle to understand. But there's a article he put out today. I encourage you to check it out and maybe give me your thoughts on it tomorrow. But it was called. Let me see here. I have it pulled up my browser. I was doing a lot of reading today, Steve, this morning, and that's why I go day by day, but I also go hour by hour. If I've watched the news, if I make the mistake of watching the news, um,
yeah,
it can get pretty daunting and depressing.
yeah.
But I try to keep the positive Mike P with the glass half full and look for the optimistic signs. And there are many of those too. I'm excited to see some of the progress being made, and there are smart people that are working on this stuff. But what do you think?
Yeah. No, no, I'm the same thing. I just don't know making, keep trying to keep yourself upbeat. There is a hashtag make me smile. I don't know if
Oh
you've
yeah,
followed it,
okay,
if you've heard it. It's basically a lot of a lot of kids are sending messages to their grandparents through this Make Me Smile. So it's like videos of them singing, playing music, doing different things. And like yourself this morning, so you're watching the news and you're like, oh, this is depressing. Okay, let me go and do something to sort of cheer myself up. And so I went and had a look at the hashtag. It's pretty cool actually what a lot of these folks are doing. I think there's also on Reddit there actually is a chat or a subcategory called "Make Me Smile." So there's a lot of people sharing and trying to uplift everybody in at this time, which
I
is
love
really
it.
cool.
I'll add that to my
Yeah,
routine because I do make the mistake of going on Twitter, and that could be depressing too. But if you look at the right
yeah,
hashtags, it could work out. So this article from Mark, workplaceinsight.net, the shape of things to come for the world and the workplace. And he starts off by talking about a lot of the global impact of this and the decisions we're making, and how we have a choice, to come together as a society, as people, and put aside our petty differences and really be united in this front, which I hope will be the case. And I've seen signs of that. The petty political and polarization from just a couple of weeks ago seems to have drifted, at least for the most part, as we focus on this pandemic and how we deal with it. And I think there's a I'll read just a quick blurb from the future of work. At the end of the article, he talks about how this is going to impact the work, and how we're considered to consider the future of work. All too often, this is being presented as a zero sum game with people swapping the office for the home. But all this will mean will be swapping one set of problems for another. Commuting at the same time as everybody is clearly a ridiculous and an anachronistic thing. Again, Mark uses a lot of big words, it swaps one set of problems for another. And he goes into the fact that he's always talked about the need to rethink how we approach work in the office, but it's not just one or the other. We have to be more deliberate as workplace leaders to find the right mix of work styles and places and technologies and tools. And it's just an interesting time. It's going to force a lot of people to make some decisions that are going to impact us for years to come, I think.
yeah. No, and I think I totally agree with you. I agree with some of the comments, but I think there's always two ways to look at everything, right? There's always a heads, there's always a tails, and I think I also look at the opportunities, the positives. How do we take this experience, right? How do leaders learn, right? Where they've a risk has been forced upon them. They have now the time and the ability to really measure productivity, measure the workforce. How does this work? Right? We know these are exceptional circumstances, so we know they're on one end of a scale. And it may be a little tough to measure, but again, as we then come back into, the lights go back on, as I often say, you know, what is that right balance? Because there are benefits to people working from home, being from home, not having
Yeah.
that commute, saving that time, saving that energy, right?
The
It's all about
sustainability
conserving.
angle is something we brought up on
Yeah.
my live stream yesterday. One of my guests said this impact
Mm,
is going to be very, very interesting to measure. And will it be sustained? And what will the new normal look like? We're going to go
yeah.
back to previous levels, and all of a sudden we'll see that spike again in uh, in carbon emissions, or will we learn something from this and find a balance?
Yeah, no, I actually have a video interview lined up to do with someone who measures sustainability, carbon footprint, and I'm excited to have the interview. I've been pushing it just simply because of the times that they are and sort of the demands of my time. But I do want to get to those conversations, and a lot of organizations have shifted to single use pantry items, right? So everyone having their cup, recyclable cup. Recyclable, I mean that it's not disposable, you reuse it. Cutlery, exactly all the same way. But with this pandemic, do we have to rethink that? What if someone hasn't washed their cup properly, their spoon properly? Can things being transmitted? Again, these are just like, I don't want to get into a doomsday thing, but again, it's like, what is the right thing to do? And is
Yeah,
the right thing not necessarily whether that's the solution's the wrong, it's the human interaction with that solution may be the problem. And I think we as humans, it's we joked about it offline a little bit. We may have touched on it yesterday, but you've always washed your hands. We've always done this. We've always done that, right? We are germaphobe. I know you wiped down. You've always wiped down your airplane seats,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
exactly.
like so. As a human nature, are we going to have to go back to those things of reminding people that these are the things that we actually need to do? you know?
Yeah, I wonder, because that was another comment. I thought this will forever change many of us, but my guest yesterday, again on the weekly live stream I do for iOffice at noon on Wednesdays, different tone than this. This is a really exciting thing for me to be able to talk to you in this kind of casual way, and then put it into that more, panel type conversation. But the voices on that panel yesterday were really brilliant, and I recommend people check out the recording if they'd like. But uh, you know, we are human beings and creatures of habit. And the consensus seemed to be that once this passes, the pandemic is behind us, whatever that looks like, however long it takes, we're going to get back to work and fall into a lot of our same habits. And a lot of the things that folks like us who look at the workplaces and look at this as a opportunity to really maybe shift some behavior, shift some things that we do to help our situation as an organization or what have you. We're going to have that same human people getting comfortable again and getting back into their old habits. So it was really fascinating to hear different voices and perspectives on that, based on, where we are today. Again, early days in this pandemic and this situation, and what it looks like in a week or a month or a year from now is something I can continue to say. I just
Yeah.
don't know. And
So on that, Mike, then, you
yeah,
think about the things that have changed. What has changed for you that may have surprised you as you have personally went through this? Like, has there been something that you've sort of went through this and you've, I don't know, be it an experience, be it a habit you've created? Is there something that you sort of that
were you getting me up earlier than I ever did before? No, I've never been a morning person, but this is actually a good thing, because in getting up and getting ready, prepared to talk to you and others, it's forced me to confront some things. But um, no, I was thinking about this, and I mentioned it yesterday as well. Is that the Zoom meetings? I've always been a guy who's had a lot of virtual interaction, whether it's interviewing people on line or what have you. And I'm finding a lot of my colleagues are new to it. So being patient with them as they come along and invite me to meetings that maybe I don't need to be a part of, but they want me there. They want to see my face. I actually enjoy seeing their faces. That's one of the side benefits of this, is that I've gotten to see and get to know some of my team that's based elsewhere, Houston and beyond. So that's a positive, and it's a good thing. But there's also this thing where I had, I'm a control freak. The germaphobe thing is probably an outlet of that, but my schedule was very special, important to me, that being able to control my schedule, do my head down work when I wanted to, not being disrupted by all these different meetings, not feeling helpless, caught in a long meeting that maybe I didn't need to be a part of, that is taking a lot of my time, when I know in my head I've got, a interview to do or a podcast to edit or preparation work for something else. So trying to figure all that out. On the personal side, I do worry about, my parents. I think I mentioned to you that I have parents who are healthy yet older, and certainly in the demographic that's most vulnerable, close to 80, and they're 10 minutes away, 20 minutes away. I usually visit them at least once a week, see them on the weekends for lunch after church, things like that. And that's gone away for the foreseeable future, and especially because we want to protect them and keep them protected during this situation. And that brings me down. That worries me. But I try to stay positive, and I for my kids as well. I have two grown children who are in the area, and they're getting by. But then, like you mentioned earlier, it's the other people. It's the people like my family that I don't worry too much about, economically or health wise even. It's those people, like you say, and we all have friends. We all have friends of friends and family members who are paycheck to paycheck, hourly workers, totally put out of work right now. And I do worry for them when I think about that. But I also am encouraged and inspired by the community and what's going on to rally around those folks. And I think that's when we as people are at our best in times of crisis. Sometimes at our worst, sometimes at our best, when we do look to help others and get out of our own little world. And
I
and
totally,
I think that you're
totally
seeing
agree.
that.
It's yeah, no, and it's the UK put out a government put out a request for NHS workers, retired NHS workers. Within 24 hours, over 400,000 people had volunteered in the UK. That's
Wow.
remarkable. And
That
again, it
is.
goes back to that human spirit, right? And those are sort of shining lights that sort of, we want to highlight. We've mentioned, yeah, there's a lot of stuff we're talking about this morning is doom and gloom. And you give me the heads up before you get on, and you're reading all this stuff and you're like, oh no,
Yeah.
what are we going to do? But there are positives to come of it, and that's where people sort of stepping up and doing these great things. And, you think about the risks that all these folks are prepared to put themselves in, because these are retired workers. These are people that are in that age group, but yet they're still prepared to put themselves forward and sort of take action. And I just hope at the end of all this that, they all get rewarded in one way or the other. I know there'll be self-reward in what
Of
they've done
course.
and how they feel good, but I hope there's, public recognition. And I know a ticker tape parade is what's required. But again, it's like, how do we as a public, allow all these individuals who are putting themselves on the front line, who are going over and beyond, taking time away from their families. And I saw pictures of one doctor today who actually set up a tent in his backyard so that he doesn't have to go into the home, just so his
Really.
his family are not being exposed. He wants to continue doing what he's wanted to do, but then also setting himself up. So
They
there
are
are some
heroes,
remarkable
man.
people out there who are
Absolutely.
doing some remarkable
Absolutely.
things.
Hey, I meant to ask you, and does this remind you at all of the post 9/11 world? Where were you? Were you
So
in
I
New
was in
York during
London.
9/11? You were
I
in
was in
London.
London at the time. Yeah, I worked for the Associated Press at the time, so
Oh,
I got
interesting.
to see some horrific images. We were getting
Oh,
live feeds through from everybody. So I was in London. I wasn't here. Yeah, and I think even Governor Cuomo yesterday mentioned that there's a lot of similarities in how he feels
I
and
think
how
that's
the
the only thing
city are
we can kind
responding.
of wrap our heads around as far as something
Yeah,
in recent history. For
yeah.
those of us, around our age who lived through that as adults, and many were children or not even born. A lot of people in the workforce, a lot of our colleagues don't have that firsthand memory of 9/11 and the immediate impact. In fact, it's almost one of those you know things I hold on as to the hope of this is that I remember distinctly the night of 9/11 thinking as I lied in bed, eerily quiet, no planes. We live by the airport here in
Mhm.
DC, Dulles Airport, and there's a constant stream of air traffic that you don't recognize. It just kind of fades into the background until it's gone.
Right.
And then it was gone. And I remember sitting there actually I was reading my Bible and trying to just kind of process all this. And I thought, this will never be the same. This world will never be the same. And I was grieving kind of the loss of normalcy and what we had gotten used to, especially when things were going so well up until in that point. But then fast forward a couple of years, um, and yes, we just began to incorporate into our lives the new reality of terrorism that was going to be part of our existence, the awareness and so forth. And I'm optimistic that we'll have that same hopefulness about the for those of us, and this is not me. I've always been aware of viruses and germs, but many who are heightened in awareness and anxiety over the coronavirus in a couple of years will be um, yes, it'll be part of our new reality. And we'll just have those things in our brain that say, wash your hands and keep some distance and be mindful of things. And you live within that new reality and you find a happiness again and a normalcy again. So I'm hopeful that we will be on the other side of this, whether it's months or longer, but you will get back to a new normal and we'll learn lessons from it, be prepared better for the next time. Is that making sense at all? That
No, no, it
parallel?
is. It is. No, no, it is. And I totally get it, right? Because I think it's the one thing that, the entire US population can relate to. Everyone remembers where they were that day. I think this moment in time, everyone's always got to remember what they were doing, who they were with, who they were not with, things that they had to do, the things that changed them as individuals, as people. And I think it's going to be a big moment. You go back generations, there was wartime, this is our generation's thing, I think.
I think so.
But it's tough. It's tough.
Are you a history
It's
guy? Do you like to read history and read speeches
yeah,
from past leaders?
I flow in and out. I flow in and
Okay.
out. Sometimes it all depends on what I've maybe watched. And there's certain types of history. I like watching documentaries. I like watching those. Some things I do read. There are a few series of books that Stephen Ambrose. I know Stephen Ambrose. This is
Mm,
who's The series Band of Brothers was based on
Yeah.
his books, and they're
HBO did a
phenomenal.
great job with
Yeah, no, they did.
the
But
series
I
there.
do like the history. I do. But I like the documentaries. But I also like real life today. I like the conspiracy theories. I like those things just because
Do
it
you?
makes my brain think differently. I do. I don't know whether it's growing
We
up in
could have a whole other.
Middletown or
We'll
growing
set
up in
up a whole
Belfast.
other live stream podcast about that,
Yeah.
about
I don't
conspiracy
know whether it
theories.
was growing up in Belfast. I was just always cynical about whenever you hear something, it's always the question behind the question. What's the comment behind the
Ah,
comment? And that
interesting.
sort of psychologically is where I look at an image and I will say, okay, what's the underlying message here? Again, it's probably just cynical things that reflected with me being brought up in Belfast. But
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't even appreciate what that was like during the Troubles. I mean, growing up in that era of a kind of a ever present dark cloud. Um, were you going to work? Were your parents going to work? They live
yeah,
under that. That's just normal,
yeah.
right? So they just
It's just
learn to
normal
adapt.
life. It's just, yeah. I mean, I didn't know any different. Trouble started when I was like, I don't know, 2, 3 years old, probably even a little bit before that, maybe. Um, yeah, it was just life to me. Um, And I didn't really appreciate it different until I went to college in Manchester and people started asking me questions. And I was like,
Hmm.
the questions that I was getting asked from these people that live, a 45-minute flight away from where I lived really didn't sort of, the picture of what they thought Belfast was and what my reality was were very, very different. But
Isn't that funny? Because now it's like again, the media presents all the most critical hotspots of this pandemic, and New York City right now is just from outside looking in, and
yeah,
it's just like this is like the doom and gloom and the doomsday scenario is just so scary. Um, but it's a bigger. We got to take that bigger picture step back and say yes, it's serious, and yes, we're gonna address it, but we need to rally around and send the ventilators and send the masks and do the things that are necessary, get the extra beds set up, and we will get through this. We have to have that, and I don't see enough of that. I love when I hear people with a more um, go get it and let's take care of the problem. And it does apply to our workplaces as well. And in fact, I'm a big Seth Godin fan, right? So,
yeah.
uh, I just retweeted this morning Seth's blog. He's a daily blogger. So we're like Seth Godin. We're daily live streamers, and
There
he's
you
a
go.
daily blogger. I think he's a little
I like what
smart.
you did
Little,
there.
yeah,
Put us
put
with
us in
Seth
his
Godin. That's
right
always
away.
good. Yeah.
Title of his blog today is "Everything Going to Be Okay?" It's the title. It depends. That depends. What do we mean by is everything going to be okay? If it's going to
Right.
be, is everything going to be the way I expect it to be? Then the answer is no. But the answer is, if the question is everything going to be the way it's going to be? The answer is yes. And the question becomes, what are you going to do about it?
Mm.
So he said it more eloquently, and I butchered it. But the idea being, we want this. Can we go back to the way it was 2 months ago or 2 weeks ago? And the answer is no. We're going to say this is the new reality, and this is a new thing we need to deal with our families, our personal lives, our workplaces, our employees, our colleagues. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to deal with it?
I love the again, I take the positive in it, right? What are the opportunities that we have as an industry, as a population? What are the positives that we can take, and what can we recreate, right? We talked yesterday about Leesman, sort of the steps that they're taking to innovate, right? You look at what we're doing here. This is an innovation for you and I. This is something that we're both passionate about, and hopefully we people find this interesting. Maybe a,
Hopefully valuable. Hopefully they'll
alongside
be
but
adding to the chat. If there's anything
of
going on in the
course,
chat, I'd love to know about it, because I think
yeah.
we'd
No, there's
love to have a
yeah.
conversation.
We've
But
got people watching, but nobody in the chat. No one's
we
brave enough
forgot
this
we got to
time.
encourage them to be
We've
a
got
part of
to,
this. We
right?
don't want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
at them. We
yeah,
want to talk with them.
yeah, yeah.
So, I wanted to bring up, and again, time flies by way too fast here, but, you were a guest on my live stream last week, and a week's
Hmm.
gone by. You remember those survey questions I asked you? I asked a couple of those same survey questions yesterday, just out of
Yeah,
curiosity. I thought I'd share one of the interesting results. I asked, and I won't go into the details here, but, I asked people how they're feeling personally managing their new arrangement, whether it's working from home for the first time or working from home with everybody else working from home. And most people are thinking they could be as productive, or maybe slightly less productive because of the disruptions. We talked a little bit of this, the family being around, dogs being around, Lori Rollinson had her
I think it's
dog
great
actually jump
though.
on her
I
lap.
think it's great. I think it's
Yeah,
great. You know, it's almost people forgive people, or people don't think about it. It's almost acceptable, right or wrong, right? You know, and I don't want to cut off your train of thought, but I mean, I sort of go back to take this with what you said earlier. I don't know if you've noticed how many guys have beards these days, right? You get on these videos and
yeah.
all the guys have a beard.
Simon
It's just
Sinek.
hilarious.
Are you a follower of Simon Sinek?
I am, yeah, yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
posting
So
like videos every day, and he looks like a mess, man. The guy needs to get a haircut and shave. But
but it's
no,
fun.
yeah,
But these are the positive things to celebrate, right? We're getting a view into all our colleagues in completely different ways,
true.
and I think they're showcasing themselves very differently with all the virtual backgrounds they put on. You know, I think you
Yeah,
just see a completely different thing. You know, animals. I know you mentioned to me about all the different animals that people are putting on their screen. So whenever they come on to the live, it's actually a picture of their
their
dog or
dog
their
or
cat
cat
or
or whatever.
something. You know,
Yeah,
I
I
think it's
love it.
really cool. It's really it's
Well,
good fun and
it's that insight into their personality that you maybe didn't
yeah.
get. That's why I'd love that question about music. When I you heard me on my podcast, always ask people about music. When I meet new colleagues at work and I'm on a conference call for the first time, I'll ask that question as well, just to get
Yeah,
that, kind of what are you listening to? What gets you going? And sometimes
yeah.
it's so surprising. But to close out the thought, and there's actually a question I asked last week that I'll ask you here in the final minutes. Um, I threw up a question for the audience, and we had a huge audience yesterday. It was really cool.
Good. Well done.
And I think it's growing each week as
Well,
people
because
continue to find out about it.
it's I feel because I contributed so much to it last week
Well, again,
that
being
you
part
know
of the opening
that was
episode,
driving it.
that's what drove it.
You're welcome,
Uh,
man. Anytime.
Thank you, Steve. I can't thank you enough. Please invite me on your live stream too, every morning at 8 a.m.
There you go. There you
Um,
go.
and the question was, and I borrowed it from a commentator I listened to on the radio. He asked it a couple of weeks ago, and I think the answer is different each week. This is one of those questions that's going to change
Hmm.
as the situation evolves. And you force people to decide one or the other. I think the answer should probably be both for most people. But during this pandemic, what concerns you most? Is it your personal health and the health of your loved ones and potentially catching the virus? Or is it the economic impacts of this and what this may do to our economy and therefore our society? How would you answer that today? And would it have been different a week ago? And likely will it be different a month from now?
It's a great question. I'd say number one first, and number two, I actually think you have to look after the individual, because only the individual contribute to the economy, right? You can't have it the other way around. The economy can't be stimulated. It can't function without the individual. We all go back to that on the airplane with the mask, right? You got to put on your mask first so you can help somebody else. So I think keeping the individual healthy, that allows individuals to then contribute, innovate, and contribute, as I say, contribute again to the economy. And I think that's sort of my perspective. That's how I would look at it. What about yourself?
Yeah.
Where do you land?
I think the audience, I'll tell you, the audience was 60-40. And
I'm
that
asking you,
that
Mike.
was the way
What's
you're
yours?
asking me, you put me on the spot. I'll be honest. If I'm being selfish, I was more about the worries in my mind. Big picture was how this is going to, if we wreck the economy and we don't make smart decisions about dealing with this. Certainly, the health of my family and those around me are essential. But if we don't keep our economy going, we don't keep our society functioning, then the fallout of that would be devastating. Mental health concerns. Again, another article I read this morning
Yeah.
was about the feeling and the ramp up of all the people calling helplines and the isolation and the trickle down that we don't see in the statistics each day about the pandemic. You don't see the stuff going on in people's personal lives that are again impacting their health and their personal well-being. So it's a big picture kind of thing, and it's no easy answers. I think you're right. I think in the near term here, we need to do this dramatic, social distancing, shutting things down. I think those are all correct decisions because we need to slow the spread of the virus. But boy, I hope there are smarter people than me thinking through the longer term consequences, because if we don't have a functioning economy where all those people we talked about at the beginning of this chat can have a place to go and work, and we all can get back to being productive and supporting one another, and even those of us who are able to weather this storm in the near term financially, we're the ones we have to go and help those who can't. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the community rallying around our workplace community. Somebody on my one of my guests yesterday said she considers her colleagues as friends and family. That's the culture of their organization. And I think we all, to some degree, can appreciate that. And we need to, we're going to know people. You may already know people who are infected, and we may, and likely after 9/11, we knew somebody who knew somebody who passed away from, who died in the terrorist attack, and we'll know people who die from coronavirus. That's just going to be a fact, and we need to really be our best selves and rally around each other, our colleagues at work, and be the leaders that it's uncomfortable being sometimes. So the answer to me is that it's both, but the immediate, right as of today, where we're broadcasting live, we're doing the right things. It's all about the public health and protecting the health of as many people as we can at whatever
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah. No, and it's a great, thank you for giving your insights, and perhaps the audience can tell us what they think. But I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Yeah,
I think people sort of believe one's going to impact the other, and it's just what's the best approach to fix one, because by fixing one, we think we'll fix the second. So
I hope so.
I think that's a positive way to look at it.
I feel better, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this. I
No,
feel
man.
ready to take on the
Thank you.
day. Let's do
Yeah.
it again
No, it's
tomorrow.
been
What do you
good.
think?
All right. For sure. For sure.
All right. I'll see
All
you
right,
then.
Mike. Take care. Cheers. Bye.
Peace out. Looks good. Cut off right
Yeah. When it should.
when it should have. I think. Did it cut off
Yeah.
right when I said see you tomorrow? I think it did.